Welcome to the Hang Time Podcast. I'm your host, Sekou Smith, here in Atlanta. We are cranking it up on the 2020 and 21 season, which is days away. Coming to you 3 times a week here on the Hang Time Podcast this season. Don't miss it. Wherever you get your podcasts, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. But before we get into our regular season rotation, we've got to preview the Eastern and Western Conference. We already did the West with Channing Frye. Today we're doing the Eastern Conference with my main man, Jason Jackson, down in Miami. Jax, just go ahead and tell me now, what's the temp? What's the weather looking like down there?
It's a glorious 77 degrees as we tape. The sun is high. The clouds are low. We refer to it as paradise because that's what it is.
That's why nobody has any tears for folks in Miami this time. There's snow in other places, ugly, gloomy, and paradise has its normal weather. Man, it's so strange, Jax, to be 71 days almost removed from the Heat playing in the finals in the Orlando bubble. Doesn't seem like we should be talking NBA season again already, but we are. First and foremost for the Heat, how have they managed this off time in terms of their heads back around the start of a new season and kind of trying to lift off from where they finished last year against the Lakers?
I was sitting on the set for the first preseason game for the Miami Heat against the Pelicans, feeling the exact same way that you just articulated. I said to our senior producer, Arnold Speaks, that it feels like we never left. Like that's what it felt like when I sat in that seat to present that first preseason game. Listen, you know the Miami Heat way. And for any of your listeners that don't, it's always just give me more. Whatever adversity you have, whatever difficulty you have, whatever any other team is complaining about, they want to eat it for lunch. It's a condition. And it may sound a little cliche or Pollyanna from a professional sports standpoint, but it's the reality down here. You've covered this team enough back when you're a beat guy to, this grander national view that you have now. It doesn't change, and it doesn't change because ownership hasn't changed, because the president hasn't changed for 2.5 decades. The head coach has been in the organization. A neat little fun fact about Spo. Spo preceded Pat in the organization and just hid for a couple weeks until Stan Van Gundy, then an assistant, figured out that there was a video coordinator hiding in an office. So that's another 25 years and 13th year as the head coach. Because of those constants, you don't get that freak out. You don't get that anxiety. They're just so fired up about how good the offense looks. There's never going to be a drop-off in defense because of the personnel that didn't change over. And then you add in Harkless and Avery Bradley, and, those guys kind of fit that particular, quilt. So this squad is just, like Mikey, man. Just give it to me, put it in a bowl. We'll eat anything. That's just the deal. That's the deal.
I love that the Heat have reasserted themselves and moved back into that position, because now it gives us a natural foil for what's going on in Milwaukee. And Giannis Antetokounmpo signs the 5-year, $228 million extension. Let me say that again. 5 years, Jax, $228 million to stay in Milwaukee and continue their quest for championship glory. I'm pitting now the Bucks and the Heat against one another, but should we consider Philly or somebody else in that mix, or does this look more like a 2-team at the top race in terms of the best in the East?
The Nets have my full attention. I only saw like the first 10 minutes of their first preseason game, and I was like, oh, okay. Okay. All right. And so all they have to really, as every team does, but specifically for them because of the gap that they get to jump with those two leading the way, they have to be mindful of health. As long as those guys can maintain, and Kyrie has his history with that, and obviously we're talking about just a devastating double, injury for KD in this space. That they get that blessing, and they get to come to the party immediately.
I like the idea of Doc Rivers and Daryl Morey kind of transform Philadelphia into whatever they believe they're supposed to be. I don't know that it happens as quickly as anybody wants it to without a trade. And obviously, we've heard James Harden's name mentioned. But does Philly look like a team that has to do something to push their way into that upper tier, or you think they're ready as is?
Oh, man, that's a tough one, right? I mean, I'm tough on Philly, and I think all of us are because of their talented 1-2 punch. And then now, obviously, having Doc's experience in the mix, they have got to be committed defensively. Like, they just got to be committed. And that's every day, every play. There's going to be things that occur that are just, well, let me tip you my cap. You all just ran a great set. But for the most part, it should be challenging and extremely difficult for any opposing team, home or road, by the way, okay, to have issues with playing against them. I have seen nights with my own eyes where I've watched that team just quit. And that can't be when you're that elite. If you really want to be a championship caliber team, when the you-know-what hits the fan, that's when you start playing even harder. When it looks like there's no way to make a way, that's when you show us, win or lose, that this is going to be a challenge, even though you think you got us down. I don't believe we can say that about Philly right now. And maybe that new layer from Doc helps.
Yeah.
But they got to hear it, right? They got to hear it, and then they got to embody it. But they've got to start on the defensive end and realize, you know what, it's actually pretty awesome if we get some stops.
They are like several teams to me with these underlying questions about their DNA. That's one thing we don't have to worry about with the Miamis, the Bucks, even the Nets. We kind of understand what their DNA is. Toronto and Boston, two teams whose DNA is locked in as Eastern Conference playoff teams. The outliers now become some of these franchises that are trying to move up into the playoff mix. Atlanta, what do we get out of that newfangled group in Atlanta? And that's in the division. Charlotte, even with and Hayward. Who's the team in the East that you think ends up being the sleeper pick, Jax, in terms of the one that moves up instead of staying where they were or falling back?
Is Washington allowed? Am I allowed to use Washington?
Yes.
I think that's going to work. I think that's going to work. I don't know. I don't have any really good reasons except for the obvious, historical connection between Brooks and Westbrook. The fact that Beal has taken that there's been even another layer to his all-starness, and that Westbrook wants to be there and seems like he recognizes he has a running mate that's hungry and wants more. And so there's something about Washington that at least I got my eye on, in the sense of, those matchups, the Miami Heat gonna have their hands full. But it's funny. Here's the thing that would bug me if I was listening to an assessment of the Southeast Division. It would bug me if I was Orlando, right? This is the team that has made the fewest changes, right? But that's also the team that always tends to, at least for the last little bit, find its way, right, to at least fighting for a spot. Now that we got, the 9 and 10, that's going to be fun to watch. I mean, think about that. There's a Southeast in position to have, all those spots chewed up. Maybe all but one team makes their way into, some slot 1 through 10. And wouldn't it be funny if all 4 of those teams that were going to be in that little do-si-do at the end, which I'm so excited about, man. I don't fear change, and so I love that this play-in is staying around. I know there's some old heads that are like, get it out of here, but I love it.
No, I dig the play-in.
That anxiety and that angst and anxiety over those few days is going to be fun. But yeah, no, Orlando's the squad that nobody's talking about from the Southeast, and all those teams that want a piece, they have to take it from them. They got to take it from Miami. So that's going to be – what a fun division.
Are there any concerns in your mind about exactly where those top teams fit? And we've talked about, obviously, Miami, Milwaukee, Toronto, Boston. Indiana's a team we did mention that has to be involved in the Eastern Conference, playoff structure when you're talking about where teams fit. Do we have a solid 6, or are we kind of top heavy and then kind of wide open after that, do you think?
still think it's madness. I think it's madness all the way through because of the fact that you got to put Brooklyn in that mix. Indiana, I assume, is going to be in that. You make that coaching change. That no offense to the new Nate, but the old Nate didn't need to lose his gig. Particularly with what he had to overcome with injury challenges. I think, in no particular order. Miami, Boston. Then after that, I'm putting Brooklyn. Mm-hmm. I'm respecting that until I'm told not to. Then from there, it starts to get jammy, right? It turns into Indiana, Milwaukee, and whew. No, we're already at 6, right?
Exactly. That's what I'm saying.
Right.
And the dynamic of the play-in makes it so unique in that used to be top 8, now it's top 6.
Right. And now it might flip, right? It might flip because of what just happens on a given night, that you do get, Orlando and Milwaukee. Let's say it's Orlando and Charlotte that turn Toronto and whomever, pick one, right? Mm-hmm. Upside down on a couple nights. It just turned, that those dynamics just happen at that time, So it's going to be fun. It's maybe it's not as crazy as the West that way, in that you have these teams with, 55, 50, 45 wins, clawing to get in. But it's still going to be, I think, a nice traffic jam.
To me, this is as interesting as the East has been, Jax, probably in about 3 or 4 years when you consider the quality of depth of teams. Obviously, I don't know that there's star-studded or as celebrated as their Western Conference counterparts as you go down the pecking order. But I think it's as deep as it's been in quite some time when you consider the number of teams that could be considered legitimate playoff locks, like teams that would slot in that top 8 and you go absolutely, 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 before you get to a questionable group.
And I didn't say Philly, by the way. I apologize.
Yeah, I mean, the Philly's in that group as well, yeah.
But who's going to push, right? Who's going to push that standard group? Will Chicago and all those young fellas, right? Will they start pushing towards 35, 40 wins, right? I mean, that's one club that could either stay in its spot or take a step, right? After a few years of adding and internally developing and growing, those are all their guys. So don't wring your hands about it. You bring in an accomplished head coach and Billy Donovan, now you might get that step.
If you look at it just now, based on what we have going in, who's your pick to come out the East? Who do you think at the end of the day has what it takes to grind its way through this thing?
Well, I work in a building where they want that. 601 Biscayne. They're the reigning Eastern Conference champions. But full well Milwaukee has done it's not or bust, right? Because they're locked in for a while now. They're riding this train. But it's time, right? It's time for that breakthrough. It's time to get to the conference championship, if not to the finals. So from a picking standpoint, they look the part, don't they?
They look it. But they looked it in the bubble, and the Heat handled them. So
right, and they're gonna have to do it again. I think. Yeah. Boston, Brooklyn, and Miami aren't going anywhere.
Yeah.
And I should make Brooklyn earn it. I know that. But they're just too skilled offensively for me to just act like they're not there.
No doubt. We're taking a look at the Eastern Conference heading into this new NBA season. Jason Jackson joining me here on the Hangtime Podcast. We've gotten through the hard part of the homework, Jax. Now, when we come back on the other side, a little recess, a little fun. We'll do some predictions. Awards candidates just for the Eastern Conference. We're stealing the brand awards that we hand out at the end of every season for the entire league, MVP, defensive player, on and on. We'll get into that on the other side of the break here on the Hangtime Podcast. Back here on the Hangtime Podcast with Jason Jackson, previewing the Eastern Conference as we get ready for this NBA season. Jax, we need some of your soothsaying abilities right now. We need I'm not going and putting money down on this stuff, but I just need a cheat sheet. Early predictions for these Eastern Conference superlatives, these awards. Let's start with our MVP of the East. I know Giannis is sitting around the house polishing up back-to-back Kia MVP trophies, but is he the MVP of the Eastern Conference again this season? Or is Kevin Durant or somebody else poised to jump in there?
Yeah, there's always going to be fatigue from the voters, right? Like Giannis is going to have to. I don't even think maintaining allows it anymore, right? Like, and it should, right? Like the numbers this man puts up every night are absolutely ridiculous. I saw his line like in 25 minutes the other day, and most people would dream for that for a game. You know? So he's still going to be, top 3 in that space for the league. But now I get to cheat because I don't have to worry about the Western Conference. I'm going to throw you a guy that is going to do everything to be considered for it, particularly on the offensive end. Not going to win it, but I'm putting this in the conversation. Bradley Beal wants our attention. He wants our attention, and he wants it now. And he's got an elite setup guy who, by the way, has the award already, right? Yes. And will do many things on many given nights that look like he should have it again, by the way, with those triple doubles talking about Russell Westbrook. So while my gut wants to stay with Giannis, and, you can easily put Durant in that conversation if he's just 80% of himself, I'm going to throw out the flyer. The man who was disgusted he was not in Chicago's initial thoughts for the All-Star game last year, and believe that Bradley Beal is going to be toward 28, 30 points a night. It's going to be tough to ignore his impact and the elevation, by the way, of Washington if they start creeping up into 6, 5, 4 spot with win and loss success.
That's a great pick in Bradley Beal that I think a lot of people wouldn't have thought about when it's off the top of the head.
And maybe I shouldn't have, by the way. But
no.
I'm feeling like there's something that's there that's burning.
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, and I think a lot of times we go into seasons with expectations for certain guys, and we get shocked. We get surprised. Defensive player of the year of these Eastern Conference teams, who do you think would be the guy that we put in the pole position for defensive player of the year?
He made it clear to me the other day. His head coach is demanding it. One Bam Adebayo.
I like it.
We'll make that move. He is already an all defensive, I believe, second teamer. So obviously he gets to take that step up the first team and get the big defensive player of the year. It's going to be a focus for him.
And a ton of talent. His block on Jason Tatum at the rim in the bubble, still playing over and over again. Every day I'm looking at TV and somebody throws that highlight out there. Spectacular play. Bam, to me, another one of these guys, Jax, who has elevated himself, signed a big, max extension. The world is about to be Bam's oyster, as they say. He's got an opportunity to take over in the East. If Joel Embiid is sleeping, Bam's going to assume that position as the best big man in the East. Most improved. Who do you think stands to get the most out of whatever this new look is for this current season for these guys?
I think it's high time that we let all of your listeners know that I am a full-time employee of the 3-time NBA champion Miami Heat. And so I'm giving you yet another Miami Heat player, and it's only because he's earned our attention. I think Tyler Hero makes that standard young star step, very similar to what we just saw from Ingram. There's a great possibility he could be in the first 5 a great deal of the season. That young fella, man, he even showed it the other night. Underhand scoops, teardrops, the 3, off the dribble, pull up from 15. I mean, it's all there. It's all there. I'm not going to get ridiculous. I'm getting myself excited. But I am considering him a top candidate. And the East's number 1 for most improved player.
I like him there, and I like him in our next category if he stays in his role coming off the bench as a 6th man. And there are candidates, obviously, guys who will be coming off the bench in reserve roles in the East that are going to have opportunities. But he sticks out in my mind as well in that slot, Jax, if he continues to come off the bench in Miami.
Going to be interesting there. I'm gonna go over. I'm going back to Brooklyn. Dinwiddie. If he does, he feels like he's kind of the guys that have been holding down the fort and have to slide around a little bit in responsibilities. I think that allows Spencer to kind of come off and just get busy. You assume he'll still have one of the all-stars with him on the floor, maybe particularly if he's the sixth man, coming in. So it may not be a lot to eat, but I think there's something there. There's, he's got to hold it down for the guys that even made this a place to land, right? That did all that work to at least get our respect.
Yeah. Dinwiddie and Karis LeVert, two young talents in Brooklyn that stand to benefit greatly. I know people were wondering, how do these guys coexist with KD and Kyrie? They don't worry about that. They found out quickly that you play off of them. Who's our rookie of the year in the East? And clearly we've got a number of different guys. I'm curious to see what LaMelo Ball does, but there's some other guys, and I'm wondering where you go with rookie of the year in the Eastern Conference.
Now, here's a tough one, right? Because it oftentimes comes down to opportunity. So Ball may have the better experience. I don't even know if is he going to start? To start? You know what I mean? So it's tough, and so, I find myself, moving my attention around and trying to figure out exactly who that kid's going to be. Are we allowed to call me back after a month? I can actually make a decision that makes some sense. The only hesitation you're getting from me is I want to be right, and this is on tape. I want to be correct. Oh, man. So, I'll just roll the dice and say the fifth pick out of Cleveland, Isaac Okoro, is going to get a lot of opportunity. And with that, that's probably what gives him a little bit more of an edge over Weissman than just because if the ball's in your hand, right, you're not relying upon other folks.
My sleeper pick for rookie of the year, especially amongst the Eastern Conference rookies, is Obi Toppin. I think when you talk about opportunity and what he can do, as a plug-and-play guy, the Knicks might have the best and most productive rookie right out the gate in Obi Toppin, but we'll see. Last and certainly not least, Jax, is Coach of the Year in the East. I happen to think that the guy who's been around the longest and has probably done the best job, so I'll eliminate you from having to mention him. But it's hard to look at Spo and not say to yourself, this is the guy. This is the guy when you talk about coaches in the Eastern Conference who stands out above the rest.
Yeah, well, you're not going to get any fight out of me. He never puts himself forward as well, right? Like, that's the thing. There's no self-marketing. Everything's about the players. He gives such a big voice to his staff members. His tree's starting, by the way. When you think about Fizz, congratulations to him and his wife on the new baby boy. And by the way, he should get another opportunity as a head coach. So many do. Why not him? Now Dan Craig's out west. You saw Juwan Howard's, obviously back at the alma mater. So Spo's tree, starting to get some big leaves on it, right? On top of the work that he's done here over a dozen years. I think there's going to be something sexy about Nash. I think it reminds me of when Doc, stepped in Orlando. He didn't have these two monsters, right? But it's going to be tough not to consider. One, you still got to do it. Let's respect the fact that even when you have great players, you still have to do it. And then I'm looking forward to some innovations, some things from him that will be unique. That'll harken back to 7 seconds or less a little bit. But isn't that fun? Isn't that fun basketball?
No doubt. No doubt.
Yeah. So I'm keeping an eye on that.
That Brooklyn situation bears watching overall, specifically for the stars coming back and the coach. I'm not complaining. I know the playoffs is far off, but I'm thinking about, a whole new world opened up to us. Travel. I wouldn't be mad if we got a chance to go up and down the East Coast from Brooklyn to Miami for conference finals. But listen, I don't want to get ahead of myself, Jack. I don't want to go too far.
You already gave yourself the vaccine, didn't you?
I don't want to go too far. I just want to make sure that when you get the convertible out for the Eastern Conference playoffs and you're driving back and forth to the beach, Save a spot in the car for your boy. Do that for me.
Come on, baby. It's a luxury vehicle. There's room for me.
Jason Jackson joining us here on the Hang Time Podcast, talking Eastern Conference preview. Jax, appreciate your time as always, sir. Continued good work. We'll be watching, listening, and loving it. Thank you, sir.
All right. Everybody stay well. Happy holidays.
Yes, sir. Happy holidays. Jason Jackson there joining us here on the Hang Time Podcast, Eastern Conference preview. Coming up on our next episode, we'll have a special guest, the Hall of Famer, Dominique Wilkins, talking about the most intriguing offseason for any team in the league in the Atlanta Hawks. We appreciate you joining us, and we'll see you next time.
This episode of NBA Hang Time is produced by Sean Bartley alongside Kendall Garris and Morgan Mitchell. Sound design by Chloe Van Til.